Welcome to another edition of A Voice to the Gentile Church. I'm Jim Wingerter. Next to me is Pastor Roger Diaz. Next to him is Dolores Lowe. So, Dolores, there was a primary in Michigan with a twist.
Oh, yes. So last night was the Michigan primary. No big surprises on the Republican side. Trump beat Haley by 40 points, so no big issues there. However, on the Democrat side, yes, Biden ran away with it, 80%, right? But Arab Democrats in the suburbs of Detroit had mounted a campaign to vote uncommitted rather than vote for Biden. And that got over 100,000 votes, which has got to have the Biden campaign losing it, right? Because Michigan is the swing state. Right now, because of the way the blue states and the red states are laid out, there is no path to win unless you win Michigan, right? So he's got to win Michigan in order to win. So now,
and that means he's going to capitulate on the conflict in between Israel and, quote, Palestine.
Yes, absolutely. You know, we're going to start seeing, I believe we're going to start seeing this administration do more and more things to isolate Israel and make Israel look bad and, you know.
Well, even now, whenever any of those folks in Michigan that were demonstrating get interviewed, which I already have a problem with interviewing people that shouldn't have a voice, but they gave them a voice, and all of them say committing genocide against our people.
Right.
There's no genocide going on here, and the people who are most sensitive on this planet about the word genocide are Jews.
Right, exactly. So interestingly enough, you know, that was last night. Today there's a report that the U.S. government has launched an investigation into the company that produces one of the components of the Iron Dome, specifically the batteries, right, that allow the system to work. That company has 3% share in the U.S. market, and 75% of its work is done here in the U.S. market, right? It's an Israeli company, but it has a U.S. subsidiary in Illinois. So the U.S. government is claiming that Finkelstein Metals, that's the name of the company, is marking up its products in the U.S. and overcharging Americans, right? So you are already seeing that, you know, trust me, with the military industrial base in America, really, you're going to worry about a company with a 3% market share marking up its products, and 75% of its work is done in the U.S.? So
well, you're kind of involved in that industry. Is that normal?
Oh, there's always all sorts of weird markups, right?
Yeah.
We actually have a company right now under investigation for mischarging, right? Overcharging the government. And they still win contracts. They still can compete. Nobody's keeping them from, you know, they're still under investigation, but they're still.
Well, a long time ago, they were paying $80 for a hammer.
Yeah. So you can already, I may be wrong, drawing a line between the Biden campaign being in trouble with Arabs and this Israeli company being basically investigated now, right? And for Israel, it's critical because without that battery, that Iron Dome isn't going to work, right?
We have a government that's so corrupt that will resort to, you know, mafia tactics. And doing something like that is, you know, that's understandable coming from our government.
So imagine, and I'm putting myself as devil's advocate, coming to Netanyahu and saying, you either put in a ceasefire or we will keep this company from making any more Iron Dome batteries. I can just see that.
Well, knowing Israel, knowing the Jewish people, they'll find a way around it.
Yeah.
They'll come up with a solution.
Yeah.
It's just amazing that we're seeing such prejudice against Israel coming from our government.
Why would the factory be in Illinois and not in Israel?
So there's all sorts of restrictions, ITAR restrictions. That's the international trade in arms that having your company based in the U.S. helps you, right?
Okay.
It's not prohibitive that you have your companies overseas, but it makes it much more difficult when you're in the defense sector if your company is overseas, right? If you're foreign owned or controlled. So you have to build firewalls between your overseas operations and your American operations. So it's all complicated.
Well, our administration, our presidential administration, continues to put pressure on Israel, threatening and making statements separate from the approval of the Israeli government,
Right.
and having the media, giving them field days to really, speak out against Israel.
Yep.
It's about fodder. It's about creating fodder for the media, and once the media gets involved, it becomes international, and then the pressure is turned on Israel. So that's what we're seeing.
Yep.
It's an amazing thing that our government will resort to these behaviors, but we're doing it.
So along the same lines, the Palestinian Authority's government basically resigned this week. So because of the dream of the two-state solution, right? That's what the Biden administration, particularly Blinken, is hawking, right? They want a two-state solution. But they realized that the Palestinian Authority has been corrupt forever, right? We all know how corrupt the Palestinian Authority. If you go to Israel and you look over on the Palestinian towns and you see the poverty and you see the rich, that's all the governmental people. So they have been pressuring the Palestinian Authority to change people, including President Mahmoud Abbas, who is now 88 years old, who was elected in 2005 for a 4-year term. And this is the longest 4-year term in the history of mankind, because he's been there since 2005. All on the 1 4-year term election, right? Nobody ever voted for him again. So he resigned, and most of his ministers have resigned, and the thought process is that they'll bring in new blood, and it'll be considered the new Palestinian Authority, and that they'll be able to be the leadership of the new Palestinian state, right?
Well, that'll be better.
Yeah. We all know what that's going to be like. It's going to be just as corrupt. It's going to be
or
terrorist.
Worse.
People forget Mahmoud Abbas was a terrorist.
Right.
He killed Jews.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty standard.
Yeah.
Pretty standard for the PA.
Yeah.
It's. I'm not surprised by this at all. I mean, but to take over the leadership makes a statement that perhaps we're positioning for a younger, more.
Right.
Maybe a different type of leadership, but their charter wouldn't allow them to change their position. Their stated goals are clear for everyone to see. They want to see an end to the Israeli state.
Yep.
Yahya Sinwar, I guess that's how you say his name.
Yeah.
Yahya Sinwar. He is known for being a vicious murderer of Palestinians, right?
Yep.
And he got his name, he got his reputation back at the beginning of the millennium for killing Palestinians, for slaughtering Palestinians, for selling land to Israel, for what's deemed as being traitors. And that's how he got his name. So, for me, that's who they are. That's who Hamas is. That's who the PA is. And until there's a complete, Hamas, the name Hamas, has to be removed. Their whole identity has to be shut down. When you have someone who's considered the leader of Hamas, who has killed, and it's not clear, but dozens of Palestinians for supposed capitulation to Israel, you have to change. You have to remove. You have to replace.
Yeah, I wonder how many of these people that are yelling genocide, if you went to man on the street interview and asked them, what does the word Hamas mean?
They don't know.
How many would know, right?
They will say, if you say violence, they will say violence against the oppressor. So it is what it is from that perspective. People are just brainwashed.
Yeah.
But when you think about what this Yahya Sinwar made his name doing, it kind of spells it out. It makes it clear who they are.
Yeah. Okay, and then down to our neighbors to the south, Brazil. So in Brazil has a dengue fever problem, right? It happens every year, as the spring rains come and all that stuff. So in 2023, the WHO the World Health Organization, convinced Brazil to use these genetically modified mosquitoes that would be released into the environment. They were funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and they would help to eradicate the dengue fever. So it's been a year. There is now a 400% increase in dengue fever in Brazil. And I just, and then they finally made a vaccine using a Japanese pharmaceutical. Well, who funded the vaccine? Bill and Melinda Gates. On the one hand, they're releasing the genetically modified mosquitoes, and on the other hand, they have all these, very similar to the whole COVID situation where lots of vaccines are being released. They're now immunizing kids 10 to 14. So we'll see. And then Carnival is right around the corner, so what's going to happen.
Carnival was 3 weeks ago.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
But this is in Brasilia, which is in the heart of Brazil.
Yep.
And so if they were really interested in isolating this, it shouldn't be too difficult.
Right.
Because it's really Brazil is a different country than most. Its capital is sort of remotely out in the middle of the country where there's a lot of open space. So they should be able to isolate this if that's their goal, to isolate it.
The thing that gets me is this rush for man to take care of all these things, right? We're gonna eradicate these viruses. We're going to fix climate change. Mm-hmm. There's all sorts of crazy stuff that these people are thinking, claiming that there was even one where we were going to shoot nuclear weapons into the sun. I don't even remember why, right? And I'm sitting there going, when has man proven that he can do all this and come up with beneficial results? It's very rare.
It's hard for me to conceive that Mr. Gates is ever surprised by what transpires, and I can't help. I'm conspiratorial, I know that, but there has to be an ulterior motive. He knows what's going on here. So
I am sitting here. Well, this is a Mac computer, so that's good. So people don't understand that when Bill Gates started Microsoft, he did it by taking advantage of a widow during her time of grief. Like within 3 days of her husband dying, he went and offered her $50,000 for MS-DOS, which is the basic operating system.
Right, operating system.
Yeah, $50,000. And she just sold it off because she didn't think it was worth anything, right? In her mind, right? She was grieving for her husband who had died. And I'm sitting there going, if you have the nerve to do something like that to a widow, that's like check number one of, I'm not going to trust you. Right. And then, of course, he's running all over the world doing all these crazy things, the AIDS experiments that he did in Africa, all those things that he's done. And people, I just don't understand how people think he's such a great guy. But anyway, well, you'll like this one. So we know that Bolsonaro is basically under house arrest in Brazil, right? Because, it's a very similar situation. They did fraud to get him out of office. He came to the U.S. for a while. He returned. So now he is under investigation in Brazil for allegedly harassing a whale.
He must have gone swimming.
He's claiming he had nothing to do with it, but apparently some guy was on a jet skiing around the whale, and somehow they tied it back to him, and they're claiming that he's the one that was harassing a whale, so now he's under investigation.
Well, they accused him of inciting a coup d'etat.
Yep.
And they want to get rid of him. There's no question about that. He's a very popular president. They basically stole the elections.
Right.
The last elections. There was a rally in Sao Paulo of 1 million people that rallied for supporting Israel. Last weekend.
That's got to be driving Lula insane, right?
Yeah.
After he called.
Yeah. So averaging about 1 million people came out and rallied in support of Israel, and Bolsonaro was there, And he spoke at the rally, and he gave a rousing talk, and the people love him.
Yep.
So hopefully Brazil will return to normalcy or sanity.
Well, there's two bright spots in Central and South America, right?
Mm-hmm.
One is, of course, Argentina with Javier Milei, and the other is El Salvador with Nayib.
Central
Bukele.
America.
Yeah, I
All
mean,
right.
there's two bright spots, and then it's like horrific going from bad to worse, right? Started with Venezuela, and Venezuela's trying to start stuff with the neighbors, and it's just getting bad.
Yeah, Venezuela is pushing a war with Guyana
Yep,
over territory.
yep.
That's amazing, Guyana.
Okay, and then back to the United States. Google. Okay, so we all have been using, I don't know, I use AI every day. I love it. I know you guys are a little bit iffy, but I love it. But I use ChatGPT, right? Which is made by OpenAI, which is a consortium of companies, including Microsoft, right? Great tool. Google has been trying to catch up, right? Everybody's playing catch up because OpenAI has been working for a decade now and has the best tool out there, right? So they're like, everybody on the market wants to use them. So Google finally came out with their own AI tool, Gemini. And they actually had another one called Bard before Gemini, but they now went to Gemini. So last week, they did this big release of Gemini. And people started playing with it, which is what happens, right? We all start playing with it and trying to figure out because really an AI is only as good as the questions you ask, right? You have to ask the questions in a certain way.
Well, a more updated database would also
right,
help.
that too, yes. Yeah. So people started asking it to do things like create images of the founding fathers. And it created images of the founding fathers who were Black, Asian, women. Create images of the Pope. Created female popes. It was asked if, in one reading that I read, somebody asked it about pedophiles and were pedophiles bad, and it would not condemn pedophilia. It would not say that pedophilia was bad. In another, it said someone asked it to create a picture of the founding fathers where the founding fathers were white, right? So they put even a bigger parameter on Gemini, right? And it came back and said that would not be inclusive, so it couldn't do it. So it has become a fiasco.
But most of them were white.
Yes, all the founding fathers were white.
Right.
But it couldn't do it because whoever trained it with woke parameters, right? And it just won't do it. That's the thing about AI. It will do exactly how it's trained, right? So like, for example, if I ask AI a question, especially ChatGPT, and it doesn't have an answer, it makes up an answer because it has been trained to answer me, right? And the answer will be really convincing. So you have to check. There's been lawyers who've gotten into trouble because it's written the paper and then put fake references in, and they never check the references because it's trained to answer you, and it will turn itself into a pretzel to answer you. In this case, Gemini's been trained to be woke, and it can't break those parameters. So the CEO of Google came out today after a humongous loss on Wall Street. Their stock tanked.
Gee, too bad.
Yeah, claiming that it was completely unacceptable and that he had people working round the clock to fix it. So we'll see. And then finally, what I consider good news, because I like putting good news in for Dale, I consider this good news. For the past couple of months, I've been whining and complaining because India landed on the moon, Japan landed on the moon, and last month NASA had announced that the U.S. would not be sending a mission to the moon for another 2026. And I'm like, oh my gosh, India landed on the moon on a shoestring budget. I mean, the amount of money that they spent to land on the moon was minuscule compared to what we spend, right? But free enterprise came to the rescue. So there's a company in Texas called Intuitive Machines. And they got together and they built a moon lander. They put it on one of the SpaceX rockets, sent it out there. it had an autonomous system in it. So when it got within 73 miles of the moon, the system figured out where to land. It decided to find the spot where to land, and it actually changed the spot based on the terrain of the moon, and it landed. So now we landed on the moon this year, along with India and Japan, thanks to free enterprise, right? Because it was SpaceX chipped in some money, NASA actually chipped in some money, and then it was like a whole conglomerate of companies that chipped in money to get this going. So
what did we put on the moon?
We put a lander, and it's running experiments, including, it also has I thought this was really cute. Students at Embry-Riddle University up in Daytona put in a special camera that does nothing but take selfies on the moon. So it's running a bunch of experiments because it's on the south.
But it's on the south pole of the moon.
Yeah. So they're looking for ice.
Right.
Because if they find ice, then we don't have to, when we start sending people to the moon, if we do, it's one less thing that we have to carry up to the moon, right? We can use the ice for water and to create hydrogen, separate it into hydrogen so that they can create fuel. And then they also have a bunch of different experiments running that these companies all funded, right? So we're back on the moon.
All right.
It's all yours.
Hot dog.
And the moon is not flat.
No, the moon is not flat. Sorry, those flat earthers that we have.
Nor is the earth. Nor is the earth.
I know we have a few flat earthers in the audience.
It's unfortunate for them. There's no rational thinking there. So we have a really good question. And the question is, I'll just jump in.
Yeah.
With Iran, Russia, and China in an alliance, and the given conditions in the world today, would you say that we are facing the fulfillment of Ezekiel 38 and 39?
Okay, so, understandable question at this time. Ezekiel 38 and 39 is about the battle of Gog of Magog. A lot of people say Gog and Magog, but it's really Gog of Magog. And when you say Gog of Magog, Tubal, Meshach, and so on, which is found in Ezekiel chapter 38, it's like saying Biden of the United States, Gog of Magog, because Magog is the territory of Gog.
Right.
In the book of Revelation, chapter 20, which we'll see, it's referred to as Gog and Magog, which is the same thing. It's like saying Biden and, or Biden of, but Biden and the United States. So Gog and Magog is really the essence of the question. Are we facing the Gog and Magog conflict, which many Bible prophecy preachers, people are beginning to look at, and it's a gross misunderstanding of the Bible, a gross misappropriation of what the Bible actually teaches about the Gog and Magog conflict in contrast with Armageddon. Sometimes people tend to put Armageddon and Gog and Magog together. According to the timeline given in the book of Revelation, they're 1,000 years apart.
Right.
So it's a very important question because somewhat credible, notable Bible prophecy people are saying it's happening, Gog and Magog, Russia, and so on. Because the name Rush is mentioned in Ezekiel chapter 38, which is not necessarily Russia.
Right.
Most equipped Bible scholars and so on will recognize Gog and Magog as the region of Turkey, directly north of Israel. But we're not going to get into the weeds with that. So the question there really, answer is no. But we have to talk about it. We have to give some understanding. So we have to talk about what it is to be a premillennialist. A premillennialist is someone who believes that we're living before the millennial kingdom, opposed to postmillennialists or even amillennialists. Mm-hmm. So the postmillennialists believe that we're living in the postmillennial kingdom. And they are the people who would interpret the Bible from a preterist point of view, that would say that the millennial kingdom that the book of Revelation talks about is the first 1,000 years after Christ. And that in the year 1000 AD, the millennial came to an end. And so we're living in the post-millennial period. And the people that hold to this are the preterists the people who hold to the preterist view of the book of Revelation, the Methodists, many Protestants. In fact, most Protestant faiths are preterists, and they're post-millennialists. Millennialists, these are people that believe that there's no millennia, and then they take sort of an allegorical view only of the book of Revelation. So when the book of Revelation talks about a millennial kingdom, it's not literal, it's some sort of an allegorical thing. So these are the millennialists. Just about 100% of evangelicals believe in a pre-millennial, that we're existing in the pre-millennial age, and that there's coming a millennial kingdom of Christ. So we have to establish what that is. So according to the Bible, there is a conflict that will occur and ensue before the millennial kingdom. And that is Armageddon, what the Bible refers to as Armageddon. We're going to read the reference here in a few moments. So what is a premillennialist? It's very important for us to establish that. Again, the belief that we exist before the millennial kingdom, and that Jesus will come and establish the millennial period, and at that point the church is resurrected. So just to capture it, a premillennialist believe, and we are premillennialists, but we're not like most evangelicals in regards to our view of the premillennial and the millennial kingdom. So the premillennialists, one more time, just to capture it, we believe that we live before the millennial kingdom, that Jesus will come and put an end to this age and establish the millennial kingdom when he will reign in the earth for 1,000 years. At his coming, the church is resurrected to usher in the millennial kingdom. All right. So what the Bible gives us is that before this millennial kingdom begins, there is a great conflict, and it's referred to in Revelation chapter 16 as Armageddon. What does Armageddon mean? It means Har Megiddo, the mountain of Megiddo. It's talking about a battle, a great conflict that will occur in the plains of Megiddo. Har Megiddo is a mountain. So again, of course, Hollywood has given us ideas and so on about Armageddon. Armageddon is seen and referred to as the end of the world, when it's really not the end of the world. Yeah, you can say it's the end of this age. So if you're really tied to this age, then it's the end of your world, for sure. So this age will come to an end with an incredible battle, an incredible conflict, which we call Armageddon. In regards to Armageddon, this great conflict, it will be the conflict of all conflicts. It will be the greatest of all conflicts. Jesus referred to this time as a time unlike any time before it or any time that will come after it. So we're not talking about Gog and Magog yet. Gog and Magog is another great conflict, but it is not like Armageddon. Armageddon is actually 4,000 years in the making. The conflict that leads to Armageddon began at Babel. Was it Babel that this conflict? Well, it's actually like 3,500 years in the making. Yeah. The conflict that leads to Armageddon, this great conflict, really began at Babel. When God destroyed Babel and put an end to that global government that Nimrod and his wife and his son began to put together, at that time, Satan still being loosed in the earth, not physically as he was before the flood, but being loosed in the earth, determined that he will work towards another Babel, another global government. And that's been his occupation since Babel. Mm-hmm. And so you're talking about a conflict that's, again, 3,500 years in the making. And so here we are, we're up to the point where this conflict is about to manifest. The devil only knows one thing that he can do to rival God or to challenge God, which is to establish a global kingdom. He tried it with Nimrod, failed. He tried it with the Assyrians, failed. He tried it with the Babylonians, failed. He tried it again with the Medo-Persian Empire, failed. Alexander, the Romans. And now he's on to something. So he's attaining to this new Babel, which is Babylon, the Babylon of Revelation chapter 17 and 18. He's attaining to it. And the actual pinnacle of this conflict is when Jesus destroys it. So Revelation chapter 18 and 19 is when this Babylon is put down by Jesus himself. It's a global, what we're going to see here is that it is a global conflict. It does not involve one king, Gog, for instance, and one region, Magog, Rosh, Tubal. It involves the entire world. We'll see that quite clearly here. So let's look at where we see Armageddon in the actual Bible. Revelation chapter 16, 12 to 26. Now this is an important issue because we have to be clear on what particular conflict we're looking at and understand the outcome of it. We have to, as Bible believers, understand where we stand today and how that relates to our ultimate redemption as a church, a body of people. Our redemption comes at the end of at the beginning of the millennial kingdom when Jesus comes. We're all resurrected. We're going to reign with him for 1,000 years. We have to know this. A lot of people seem to want to get by without that understanding, without a proper understanding of where we are prophetically, and that is because we believe that we're going to be raptured out of here. It's not relevant. Why is it relevant if I'm going to be raptured out of here anyway? Well, the truth is, according to the Bible, we're not going to be raptured out before the tribulation, which is a different subject, which we might talk about. The tribulation period comes to an end with the beginning of the millennial kingdom. So yeah, we should know about this. We should understand this and be prepared for it. So in Revelation chapter 16, Jim, we've read this and talked about this many times. And to us, this is sort of old hat. But the truth is, many believers are totally oblivious to this because their Bible teachers are not teaching them rightly concerning where we are in terms of Bible prophecy. And it's a travesty. You know, Jesus said that not one jot or tittle, I'm using King James, the King James language, will be done away with. Prophets and the law, of the prophets and the law will be done away with until all is accomplished. So when we talk about the prophets and the law, or Torah and the prophets, we think of the Tanakh. But he didn't include the entire Tanakh. He just said the Torah and the prophets, which are two aspects of the Tanakh. There's also the Tehillim, the Psalms and the stories. So he was talking about Bible prophecy not being done away with, not being unrelevant or irrelevant until all is accomplished. So Bible prophecy is important. It absolutely is important. In fact, Revelation chapter 19, we see that the angel speaking with John said quite clearly that worship Jesus, worship God, worship Jesus, because the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. Now, you examine that statement and try to perceive what the angel is saying. The testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. So prophecy is the testimony of Jesus. It's important. And when you look at the ministry of Jesus, he interjected eschatology just about in every instant. Even on the Sermon on the Mount, he ended up with prophecy. His parables, more than half of his parables is about prophecy being fulfilled. The Olivet Discourse, 100% prophecy. So yes, prophecy is important, and we cannot just sort of push it aside because of our pre-tribulationist viewpoints. It's a mistake. So in Revelation chapter 16, 12 to 26, Jim, a few verses, I'll help you read as we go along.
And
Hold on one second.
Okay.
Did I say 12 to 26?
Mm-hmm.
12 to 16, 26. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
12 to 16, much less.
Just one key off on the keyboard.
Yeah.
And the sixth angel poured out his bowl upon the great river, the Euphrates, and its water was dried up.
Now, stop right there.
Yep.
So, we know that's happening today, right?
Right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of clamor about that.
Yep.
And the people that are looking to Gog and Magog, the people with the misunderstanding of the millennial kingdom and the place that Gog and Magog will occur, they're saying that's it. The way of the north, you know, the army from the north, Gog. But this is leading to Armageddon, which is an entirely different conflict.
Different battle. Yeah.
So this is happening right now. And quite frankly, you've looked into this, I'm sure, and you. Scientists are baffled as to what's happening with this major river. There seems to be no cause for it, but it's happening. And, you know, I don't listen to a lot of people reporting strange occurrences because there's always someone who wants to embellish something and just create something out of nothing. But from what I can tell, there are some very strange things happening around the Euphrates River. I'm not going to talk about them because I don't want to give them place. But if half of what they're saying is happening, this is a very a very mystical thing that's happening. Very strange things are happening. Nevertheless, we don't want to talk about those things. But so yes, the Euphrates River has dried up. Yes.
That the way might be prepared for the kings from the east. And I saw coming out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet, 3 unclean spirits like frogs.
Okay, let's pause there for a little moment. So what is he talking about? Out of the mouth of the dragon. Who is the dragon?
Satan.
Satan,
The
adversary.
serpent of old. Who is the beast? A world system, a
Right.
world government. I mean, we've been over this many times. Who is the false prophet? A second
Right.
beast that we
Religious order.
see, right?
Yeah.
A second beast that we see, Revelation chapter 13, which is a religious beast, has 2 horns like a lamb, but speaks as a dragon. This religious beast, the second beast, seems to be able to capture the minds and the hearts of the people, and causes the people to take a mark, which is the mark of the beast. Something that will identify people as being given over to the beast. So this is the religious beast. So the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet, they form something like an unholy trinity. And their purpose is to bring about this war. They're bringing humanity into a place of actually commitment against God. So spirits, unclean spirits are coming from them like frogs. Leaping, these unclean spirits are leaping from this unholy trinity. And so this is the period that we live in right now. Because the beast is in place, the false prophet is already spewing its rhetoric.
Right.
I mean, we talked about on this program about a year ago about this global religious nucleus of religions met on Mount Sinai, the pseudo Mount Sinai, and declared the 10 Commandments of the world order, right?
Mm-hmm.
The new world government. So yeah, the beast is already in place, the false prophet is there, and Satan's been preparing for this for 3,500 years. So go ahead.
For they are the spirits of demons, performing signs which go out to the kings of the whole world, to gather them together for the war of the great day of God the Almighty. Behold, I am coming like a thief. Blessed is the one who stays awake and keeps his garments, lest he walk about naked and men see his shame. And they gathered them together to the place which in Hebrew is called Har Megiddo.
And this is that great conflict that's being precipitated by the dragon's desire to rule over a global government. And he has it. It's in place. The beast, the false prophet, he has what he needs. He's having his 15 minutes of fame, and this is Armageddon. Now, if you look at verse 17, it begins by saying, "And the 7th angel poured out his bowl." That's relevant to the 7th trumpet. The 7th bowl is relevant or related to the 7th trumpet. So now, following this arrangement by the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet to bring the world into this battle of Armageddon, following this, immediately comes what is called the 7th bowl of wrath, which is the 7th trumpet. Now, let's talk a little bit about Armageddon. We read about it. Let's talk a little bit about it. Armageddon is really, and we're going to read this here in a few moments, Armageddon is really when all the nations has it up to here, when they come to the end of tolerance towards Israel, and they ultimately will move upon Israel. We'll see the evidence of that here in a few moments. This is Armageddon. Now, we're not far away from that right now.
Nope, they're not.
A survey was done, and this survey was conducted by an Israeli company, and for obvious reasons, indicating that 85% of the people they surveyed, which reflects the broad public of the United States of America, from their survey, it all depends on where they did the survey, right? So if they did a survey in...
They didn't call me up.
No. If they conduct a survey like this in Tennessee, they'll get the results that they got. 85% of Americans are in favor of what Israel is doing. 15% are not in favor of Hamas. So if you do that survey, for instance, in New York City, you'll get different results.
Right. Yes.
Right. So, but nevertheless,
Hopefully they spread it out right across the country.
right. I don't think so. So this Israeli company did this survey, and they're using the results of the survey to rebuff Biden, and they're using it right now quite a bit. Bibi used it. His spokesperson used it, and so they're doing war with Biden. They're contesting Biden, which they ought to do. But I think a broader survey will indicate that more than half of the American people would stand with Israel. But what about our government?
Right.
Our government does not, will not, cannot, and never will. Now, we're all optimistic about a Trump presidency, which I am not.
Yeah.
I am not optimistic about a Trump presidency at all. Even if he becomes president, I'm less optimistic. And that's just where I am at right now. But ultimately, this nation, by any means, through any means, will lead a confederation of nations that will come against Israel. I'm not talking about the 50% of this nation that will not. The truth is, we don't matter.
Right.
Our opinions really does not count for anything.
Well, that's obvious in today's cultural climate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything that Christians stand for, we're being called Christian nationalists, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're actually making a distinction between Christians who believe their Bible and don't, right? So yeah, it
And
doesn't matter.
even in the Christian landscape, there is a movement now, even among evangelicals, to sway young people away from supporting Israel. Whereas historically, evangelicals, I don't know what percentage we are. I am an evangelical, but I don't believe like most evangelicals.
Right.
I don't know what percentage we are relative to the national, the amount of Christians that actually exist in this country. We got to be in the upper 40%, or maybe 30%, somewhere there. So evangelicals, young evangelicals, are being swayed away from supporting Israel. So this movement is broad and sweeping. And ultimately, this country will stand against Israel together with all the countries of the world, and it will come to a point where they will march against Israel or approach Israel to subdue and to crush Israel, to put Israel in its place. This is Armageddon, according to the Bible. There's some important things that will occur before this happens. 3 prophets, Amos, Jeremiah, and Isaiah, speaks about the destruction of Damascus. And the destruction of Damascus is not going to be carried out by an army. It's going to happen in a way where Damascus will be completely leveled, and its walls, which are standing today, will turn to molten rock. And the city will no longer exist. It says, I think in Amos, that jackals will not venture into that place. It will be a complete wasteland. This will happen. Has it ever happened to Damascus so that we might be able to say, well, that's already done? No. Damascus is today the oldest standing city on this planet. There's not a city older than Damascus that's never been razed, never been destroyed. So that's going to happen. Is that going to have something to do with the nations forming a confederation and coming against Israel? Perhaps. Certainly, if that was to happen, let's say the 3 prophets that spoke about the destruction of Damascus, they were speaking on behalf of God, the God of the Bible. And let's say that were to happen by any means. I'm not saying it's a nuclear detonation of a nuclear weapon. Let's say God just, for whatever purpose, zaps Damascus. Israel will be blamed.
Right.
No question about it. Israel would be guilty because already Israel is approaching Damascus with their planes to take out strategic, points that relates to Hezbollah. So already Israel is dealing with Hezbollah in Lebanon, southern Syria, and even as far up as Damascus. They did strike in Damascus a couple of weeks ago. So naturally, if this was to happen at any point in the future, Israel would be to blame, and perhaps that would be the catalyst to ultimately bring all the nations against Israel. Nevertheless, it's going to happen, and it's going to be incredible. So Armageddon is about when the nations decide to reproach, or to come upon Israel. Now, with that, let's go to Revelation chapter 19. And I got quite a bit. Let me read this, Jim, 11 to 21. It's a bunch of verses. Let me read a little bit for you. We have a lot of reading to do still.
It's fine.
So, I'm trying to move along here. If I'm moving too fast, excuse me. But let's read. Revelation chapter 19, verse 11, excuse me, comes after what chapter 18 refers to as the destruction of Babylon. Babylon is a world governmental system. Revelation chapter 18, it is destroyed. In fact, the angel calls for God's people to come out of her. Come out of her and don't partake in her judgment, the angel says. So, Revelation chapter 18, Babylon, the system is put down. It's out of compliance, but its kings and its ruler, its army is still functioning and approaching Israel. This is when Jesus comes. This is the end of this age. This is the beginning of the millennial kingdom. And this millennial, this occurrence will ultimately lead to what we know as, Gog and Magog. So let's read 19:11. And I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat on it is called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and wages war. This is Jesus. His eyes are a flame of fire, and on his head are many diadems, and he has a name written on him which no one knows except himself. He is clothed with a robe dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. And the armies which are in heaven, clothed in fine linen, white and clean, were following him on white horses. This is us. This is the church. How do we know that this is the church? Because in verses 6 to 8, we see that the marriage supper of the Lamb has come, and white linen robes were given to us. And so here we are. We're coming with Jesus. He's on a white horse, which symbolizes his glory, the glory of God. And we're coming on white horses as well. We're glorified in white robes. We are a holy priesthood. This is what we are, because the fine linen, the linen is the garment of the priests. Yep. So he's coming. What's he coming to do? That's what we're going to look at right now. The armies. If we are an army, what are we coming to do?
Wage war.
Yeah.
To conduct a military campaign. The armies which are in heaven, clothed in fine linen, white and clean, were following him on white horses. From his mouth comes a sharp sword, so that with it he may strike down. What's he going to do to the nations? He's going to strike down the nations. No mention there of Gog and Magog. The phrase there, the nations, is indicative of all the nations, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't single out Gog, Magog, Meshach, Tubal, and Rush.
Right.
The nations. So he's going to strike down the nations. Wow. So this is sweet Jesus. He's having a bad moment, I guess, from the standpoint of liberal Christianity. And he's coming to wage war. He's coming to put down rebellion. And he will rule them with a rod of iron. And he treads the winepress of the fierce wrath of God the Almighty. And on his robe and on his thigh he has a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Jesus, the great King, Lord of all lords, is coming to rule on behalf of God.
With a rod of iron.
Yes.
And that's not just when he comes, that's the endurance of the millennial reign.
Right.
Absolutely. He's going to be a sovereign king. So let's read on. Then I saw an angel standing in the sun, and he cried out with a loud voice, saying to all the birds which fly in mid-heaven, come, assemble to the great supper of God, so that you may eat the flesh of kings, and the flesh of commanders, and the flesh of mighty men, and the flesh of horses, and those who sit on them, and the flesh of all men, both free men and slaves, and small and great. So all is inclusive there. All is inclusive there. These birds, and it's a symbolic reference of the slaughter that will occur. This is tough to deal with because we want to see Jesus from a very benign perspective, from a very benign point of view. But this is actually the Jesus of the Bible.
Right.
And I think many Christians, we've been conditioned to look for a softer, gentler, kinder Jesus. He is the Good Shepherd, but he's also the Lion of the tribe of Judah, introduced as such in the book of Revelation. He is the Good Shepherd, but again, he's also the Lion of the tribe of Judah, who will come and execute God's purpose. Now let's read on. And I saw the beast. When last did we see the beast? Together with the false prophet and the dragon, right? who is Satan. And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies assembled to make war against him who sat on the horse and against his army. So this armada of nations, this confederation of nations, are assembled to make war against him. Where is he going? Where is he going to when he comes?
Jerusalem.
Jerusalem. So this army is poised to take Jerusalem. That's their purpose. And in effect, in they wanting to take Jerusalem, they're preparing to make war against him and those who come with him. God is taking this very personally. God loves his people. He has a great plan for his people Israel. He's faithful to his word. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever, and he's not going to turn his back on Israel. He's going to send his son to fight for Israel. And the beast was seized, and with him the false prophet. So now that Holy Trinity is being dismantled by Jesus. The beast and the false prophet, who performed the signs in his presence, by which he deceived those who have received the mark of the beast, and those who worshipped his image. These two were thrown alive into the lake of fire, which burns with brimstone. So what's the destiny of the beast and the false prophet?
The lake of
the
fire.
lake of fire, which burns with brimstone. Eternal damnation, to the recesses of eternal damnation. That's where he will send the beast and the false prophet. Now,
which are made up of people from around the world.
So we're talking here about masses of people,
masses of
politicians,
people,
kings, free men, bondmen. Yeah. So yes, which is an amazing reality.
Yes.
When you really,
yeah.
when you really think about that, it's shocking that that's what Jesus is coming to do. But that's what we're seeing.
Yeah.
Either we can take the position of the preterist and say this was all done. This is the millennial kingdom. That this is what led to the millennial kingdom at the year 1080. We can say that and feel better about the Jesus of the Bible. You know, it's done, it's over, it's preterist.
Well, we look at that history, nothing like this happened.
Well, they can come up with all sorts of, it happened in the spiritual world, whatever. Yeah, people do this. Or you can take the purely allegorical view and say this is all allegorical, it doesn't mean anything, it's not literal. Again, we are evangelical in our approach to Bible prophecy, so we're literalists. We're looking for this to be fulfilled.
Yes. Yes.
I did have a discussion with a post-millennialist once, and I just had to walk away.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough one. So, now, verse 21. And the rest were killed with the sword which came from the mouth of him who sat on the horse, and all the birds were filled with their flesh. Ooh. Tough. And this is why a lot of people will reject the book of Revelation or not embrace the book of Revelation and ultimately say, well, it's not for me. It's for the prophets, it's for the theologians. It's not for me. I don't understand it. I'm not going to be here. I don't count in this at all. When in fact, if you are in Messiah, you will resurrect and come with him. You will witness this, and I'm going to say something that will probably tweak a number of people. You will witness this, but you will also participate in this.
Yes.
Right. So tough, right? Mm-hmm. We're not beating around the bush here. So this is what we see, and this is coming. This is going to happen. All right. Now this leads up to the millennial kingdom, which leads up to Gog and Magog, which we will come to here in a moment. But let's talk about this fact that Armageddon is a battle, it's a conflict that deals with all of the nations coming against Israel. Let's establish that. Jim, if you can read Zechariah chapter 12 for us.
You jumped.
1 to 3. And I'll prepare to read Joel chapter 3, 1 and 2.
The burden of the word of the Lord concerning Israel. Thus declares the Lord who stretches out the heavens, lays the foundation of the earth, and forms the spirit of man within him. Behold, I am going to make Jerusalem a cup that causes reeling to all the peoples around. And when the siege is against Jerusalem, it will also be against Judah. And it will come about in that day that I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the peoples. All who lift it will be severely injured, and all the nations of the earth will be gathered against it.
This is Armageddon. In fact, Zechariah chapter 12 all the way to 14 is about this period, and we're not going to get into all of it. And it actually culminates in Zechariah chapter 14, where we see that all of the nations, those, and it says it this way, those that are left
Yeah.
will come up to Jerusalem every year to celebrate the feast of Sukkot. So 12 to 14 is all about this period that we're looking at right now. Also, I'm going to read, Jim, in Joel chapter 3.
Okay.
I'm going to read 1 and 2. Same conflict. This is the culmination of this conflict again. For behold, in those days and at that time, when I restore the fortunes of Judah and Jerusalem, I will gather all the nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. This is Jezreel. This is Megiddo, the valley of Jehoshaphat. And Jehoshaphat there is not a name. There was a king whose name was Jehoshaphat, which means that God is judge. Yeho is judge. But the valley of Jehoshaphat really says where God will judge. That's what it's talking about. I will bring them down to the valley where God will judge. Then I will enter into judgment with them there on behalf of my people and my Nakalah, my inheritance Israel, whom they scattered among the nations, and they have divided up my land. So I say, woe to the Biden administration and other entity that pursues
Sure.
a Palestinian state.
And Trump, when he was president, put his hand on the land
and
of Israel.
That's when I turned away from Trump.
Yes.
So here we are. God's making a very clear and vivid statement. The nations will divide up his land. To this day, the land is still divided. It is. And the very fact that the United Nations can declare that Hamas is not a terrorist organization and refer to it as a legitimate governmental system is the very fact that the land is divided. So who's struggling to divide the land of Israel? The globalists. What is the spirit behind the globalists? Who is the impetus behind the globalist?
Satan.
The devil himself.
Sure.
So the devil is having his moment, and he is horrified.
Yep.
And he ought to be horrified because Jesus is coming.
Yep.
Yep.
And when he comes, he'll put down this system that the devil has brought into existence. 3,500 years of his work,
Right.
of his endeavoring, is going to be crushed.
You know, the sad thing is, obviously, most of Christianity is not reading the Old Testament very much because the litmus test is Israel, right?
Yeah.
Always.
God says,
It's all
I'm
about
judging
Israel.
on behalf of my people, Israel, right?
It's all about Israel. You know, it was God who dispersed Israel from the land of Israel. Why? Because he will chastise those whom he loves. But he's faithful. We'll hold on to that. Even as Christians, we know that God is just and he will chastise. But he is always faithful to his word. And so Israel has been chastised. He's brought them back to the land just as he said he would. One of the things that we see in conjunction with the restoration of Israel is preparation for judgment of the nations.
Right.
And why is he going to judge the nations? Because they went too far. He determined to drive them out into the nations, from nation to nation. He determined that. But the nations exacted way more than God had determined. And a good example, like we've talked about before, is Titus, Emperor Titus. What was his emperor name? I can't remember. He was Titus, the legionnaire, the general that became emperor, whatever his name was. Doesn't matter. Like we talked about before, Titus decided that because the Jewish nation was such a fly in the ointment, such a bug, such a tick, that he would absolutely raze Jerusalem, completely lay it waste, make it so that no one will ever be able to return to Jerusalem, and there will never be another temple. That was his determination. Secondly, he decided that he would destroy all of the genealogical evidence, right? So you know that when Mary conceived and when she was about to give birth, she went to Bethlehem. For what purpose? To register as of the tribe of Judah, of the lineage of the house of Bethlehem. So she went there for that purpose. In other words, genealogies were carefully kept. Well, Titus decided he will burn every bit of it. And in doing so, somehow, he'll do away with the Jewish people. And then, thirdly, he decided that he will name the land Elia Palestinia, which is why we're struggling today, right? So God is going to hold the nations responsible and accountable for going too far with that judgment. And that's what this wrath is about. That's what we're seeing here.
There's a special hot place in hell for Titus.
Yep.
Yeah. That's what we're seeing here. We're seeing God's wrath concerning what the nations has done. Jesus comes to press the winepress of the fierce wrath of God the Almighty. And it has a lot to do with what we're seeing in the world today. So let's talk about Gog and Magog. Again, what precipitated this question? No doubt, a lot of Bible prophecy people who are much more famous than I am, much more eloquent, much more, established.
Yeah, but they
in the
don't
Christian
always
world.
get it right.
Right.
Yeah. These people are really excited about Gog and Magog, and they're doing teachings, writing books, giving seminars, and a lot of Christians who are not grounded in the Word of God are being
Right.
drawn into
Right.
it. All right, so the truth is we should not be not grounded in the Word of God. We should be grounded enough in the Word of God to recognize that these people are wrong,
Right.
and we should be able to call them on it. And I guess that's what this program is all about. So
Be
Gog and
prepared to
Magog.
give a defense for what you believe.
Right.
Well, what we know to be true. I mean, it's
Right, right,
You
yes.
you can have faith based on God's word, but when it's clear, when it's concise and outlined, delineated clearly, you just expound. You just declare what it says, and that's what we're doing here right now. So, in regards to Gog and Magog, in other words, it goes beyond belief. It's a heavy conviction because the word says it. So in regards to Gog and Magog, okay, so Gog and Magog, according to the book of Revelation, comes at the end of the millennial kingdom. So we read up to the coming of Messiah. Let's read Revelation chapter 21 to 3. Now, this is the beginning of the millennial kingdom. What does Jesus do? He puts down the human rebellion, and then he turns to the angelic rebellion, and he's going to take an action in regards to the serpent Satan, and we have to say also his entire minion, because he is not alone, right?
Right.
He took a third of the angels into rebellion with him. So the angelic rebellion involves Satan and his followers, the angels that followed him into rebellion. So let's see how the millennial kingdom begins.
1 to 3. 1 to 3. And I
Yep.
saw an angel coming down from heaven, having the key of the abyss and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold of the dragon, the serpent of old, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years, and threw him into the abyss, and shut it, and sealed it over him, so that he should not deceive the nations any longer, until the 1,000 years were completed. After these things, he must be released for a short time.
So this is the basis of the millennial kingdom, right? There are two bases that we find in Revelation chapter 20 for the millennial kingdom. One is Satan being thrown into the abyss for 1,000 years. And then in verse 6, blessed and holy is the one who has part in the first resurrection. Over these, the second death, which is the lake of fire, has no power, but they will be priests of God and Messiah, and will reign with him for 1,000 years. So this is the millennial kingdom. Satan is put away for 1,000 years. He has no manifestation in humanity any longer for 1,000 years. At the end of the 1,000 years, he's released for a while. And then he creates this great rebellion in a very short space of time. And that's why I say that the Gog and Magog conflict is entirely different than the Armageddon conflict.
Right.
The Armageddon conflict is 3,500 years in the making. Gog and Magog happens very quickly. Right? So Satan is released at the end of the millennial kingdom, and he brings this rebellion into existence. The church, in the meantime, is reigning in the earth with Christ as priests for 1,000 years. And then in 7, Jim, if you would read 7 to 10,
And when
here's the conclusion. Here's the conclusion of the work of redemption. This is where Gog and Magog meets its end. Now again, according to Ezekiel chapter 38, Gog is a prince. He's the prince of Magog, Meshach, Tubal, Rush. These are areas that are somewhere north of Israel. It can be Mongolia. It can be England. It can be the United States of America. Anything that's north of Israel. So Gog and Magog. In fact, it can be the entire world. Again, Satan somehow manages to bring an ultimate rebellion in a very short space of time against God and against Israel. So let's read that.
And when the 1,000 years are completed, Satan will be released from his prison and will come out to deceive the nations which are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog,
There you have it.
to gather them together for the war. The number of them is like the sand of the seashore. And they came up on the broad plain of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints and the beloved city, and fire came down from heaven and devoured them.
Okay. So now, very clear. This is the end of the millennial kingdom. There is no way you can put this at the beginning of the millennial kingdom.
Right.
It's impossible to do that based on what we just read. So we're locked in. Gog and Magog, or Gog of Magog. And I love what's stated here from the four corners of the earth.
Yeah.
In Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39, it talks about Gog and Magog coming from the north and so on. And that's fine. Doesn't matter where he comes from. He puts together a global army that once again attempts to destroy God's people and to take God's holy city, the beloved city. So Gog and Magog, it comes at the end of the millennial kingdom. So how do we deal with Ezekiel chapter 36 and 38 and 39? Well, we have to put Ezekiel 38 and 39 before 36 and 37. I guess my math is correct. Right. So we have to put it before 36 and 37.
Not everything is chronological in the Bible.
Exactly.
But this is. This is clearly chronological.
Okay.
So, absolutely, and I'll tell you why. It's absolutely chronological. Because 36 is, God is restoring the land of Israel, which has been happening now for about 500 years. The land was barren until the first set of Jews began to trickle into the land. And very slowly and very gradually, the land began to blossom once again. So that began in the mid-1500s. So for about 500 years, the land has been blossoming. It really took off about 120 years ago. And today, the land is just completely different than it was even a mere 50 years ago. The land is responding to its people. And Joel said it. This is God's Nakalah. The land and the people, his inheritance. So God's inheritance is beginning to reverberate the reality of God's redemption. It's beginning to react to God's work of redemption. So now, Ezekiel chapter 36 is all about that. Chapter 36 also deals with the people being prepared for the land, and that God will put his spirit in them, and they will know him. He will be their God. They will be his people. He'll bring them back to the land. 37 is all about this incredible reality that the nation of Israel will come into existence again, and an army, the valley of dry bones. And this, we're in that process right now. That's not complete. We think that, oh, that's complete, that's fulfilled.
No.
No. It's still going on.
We're still in that process.
Probably about halfway.
Maybe we want to believe that, or maybe further along. We don't know, but there are things that are yet to happen in regards to this prophecy of Ezekiel chapter 37. Now, the reality that it's not completely fulfilled, we're going to read about right now. In chapter 37, I'm going to read 24 to 28, which is very important. So 24 to 28 is dealing with what comes at the end of the process of the ingathering. Clearly, in chapter 37, tucked away in there, not for us to see, but for us to understand, is the coming of Messiah Jesus. We're going to read about my servant David in chapter 37, verse 24, and the other verse. My servant David. So clearly, we would maintain that it's not referring to a reincarnated David or David resurrected. No, it's dealing with my servant David, who will be prince over Israel. It's pointing to the son of David, who can only be Jesus, can only be the rightful prince of Israel. So when you see a reference here made to David, it's referring to the son of David. And why would I say this? Because it's dealing with God's dwelling place. Jesus is the builder of that dwelling place. Yeshua is the one who will bring God's habitation, his mikdash, and his mishkan, which is what we'll talk about in a moment. Jesus is the one who brings his mikdash and his mishkan, his habitation, to Jerusalem. So let's read it. My servant David, or I say the son of David, will be king over them, and they shall all have one shepherd. That can only be the good shepherd. And they will walk in my ordinances and keep my statutes and observe them. This is Israel redeemed. This is Israel following the millennial kingdom. They will live on the land that I gave to Jacob my servant, in which your fathers lived. And they will live on it, they and their sons sons forever. And David, the son of David, my servant, will be their prince forever. That can only refer to Yeshua. He is that prince. I will make a covenant of peace with them. It will be an everlasting covenant with them. And I will place them and multiply them, and will set my sanctuary, all right, his mikdash, in their midst forever. My dwelling place also. Now this is his mishkan. Now, if you go back to Exodus chapter 25, verse 8, God said to Moses, let them build a mikdash, a sanctuary, that I might dwell in the midst of them. And let them build the tabernacle, which is the mishkan. So in chapter 25 of Exodus, verse 8, there are two references there that we ought to look at. The mikdash and the mishkan. Here we're seeing the same thing, right? Mm-hmm. The mikdash is the sanctuary. That's what the word mikdash means. But then his dwelling place also, which is his mishkan. And we'll talk about the difference between the two right now in a minute. Okay, so my dwelling place, my mishkan, also will be with them. It's wonderful. And I will be their God, and they will be my people. Now, this is important, verse 28. And at that time, in other words, and the nations will know that I am the Lord who sanctifies Israel when my mikdash, his sanctuary, is in their midst forever. Now, this is not the Antichrist temple. This is God's temple. This is his mikdash, his mishkan, his dwelling place. Many evangelicals will have no choice but to come to the conclusion that this is referring to the Antichrist temple. Why? Because this saying that this is the Antichrist temple fits into their eschatology.
Right.
Saying that it's God's actual dwelling place, his mishkan, does not fit into their eschatology. Their model of eschatology is taken from the Moody Bible, which has us going off to be somewhere in the universe, heaven, not coming here to earth. And that Moody Bible is a travesty in that sense, because the truth is we are coming here. We are the mishkan. We are his dwelling place that will come to the mikdash. The mikdash is the third temple.
House versus home.
You're right, exactly. The mikdash is the third temple, Ezekiel's temple, that we're going to see here in a few. We see further on in the book of Ezekiel.
Right? Yeah.
So his third temple will be built, and that mikdash will become a mishkan when Jesus brings the living temple, God's dwelling place, to Jerusalem. Now the Bible tells us that when he comes in the glory. What glory? The Shekinah glory. In the word Shekinah is Shakan, the glory that he dwells in. So this is what we're seeing here. Now, following this, we see Gog and Magog. So naturally, he's talking about the millennial kingdom. He says he will put his sanctuary in the midst of Israel. Then and the nations will know that I am the one who... So in other words, from chapter 36, 24 to 28, to chapter 37, 24 to 28, to 38, is that leap from the initiation of the millennial kingdom to Gog and Magog. All right, that's the chronology here. And it's obvious because his sanctuary is in the midst of Israel. Now, chapter 38 and 39 paints a picture of Israel existing in relevant peace. Not relevant peace, absolute peace. No walled cities, no cares. Suddenly from nowhere comes Gog and Magog. It's almost as if no one expected Gog and Magog, which is exactly what Revelation tells us. Chapter 20. That he's released, Satan's released, he brings the nations up to
There's a
Jerusalem.
world full of people that have never known his influence.
Right.
And somehow he does it very quickly.
Yeah.
Now, that's the picture that we're seeing here in Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39. It is something that sort of takes Israel by surprise. The references here are clear. They're living in security. Verse 14, therefore prophesy, son of man, and say to Gog, thus says the Lord God, on the day when my people Israel are living securely, you will know it, and then you will come up. So is Israel living securely today? Will Israel live securely any period before Armageddon?
No.
No.
No. What's the condition in Israel today? Israel, the entire nation, is a walled city.
Right.
And they have to live like that.
Right.
Well, Gog and Magog, this occurs when Israel is living in security. And again, if you read the entire passage, 38 and 39, it's clear that Israel didn't expect this. God knew it was coming, of course. And God's prepared for it. So Gog and Magog comes at the end of the millennial kingdom. It does not come with Armageddon. Many people struggle, and I see them doing it, to tie Armageddon and Gog and Magog together. And the reason they do it is because of the Moody Bible. Their eschatology does not allow them to see what we just talked about. We spent about an hour talking about this, and it's pretty clear, all right? If you're so connected to evangelical eschatology, you're going to reject this, or it's going to challenge you.
Right.
My hope is that it challenges you.
Yes.
And let the Bible define your eschatology. We're free to do that, right? Mm-hmm. We have the Bible. We're not unable to understand what it says. So the Moody Bible and Bible prophecy teachers that have existed for the last 120 years or so, since the Moody Bible came into existence, has promoted this idea of a pre-tribulationist, rapture, pre-millennialist kingdom, and that we're not here, we're off somewhere, so we really don't care about what's happening here during that period. It's just wrong. We have a lot to do with the millennial kingdom. We will have a lot to do in the millennial kingdom. We read it. We will be priest of God and Messiah, and will reign with him on the earth for 1,000 years. That's very vivid. So we have a lot to do with the millennial kingdom. So the idea that we shouldn't even concern ourselves with this is just wrong. We should be very much involved with what's happening right now in terms of having hope. Jesus said, when you see these things coming, look up, your redemption is near. But also the redemption of Israel. And the redemption of Israel and the redemption of the church, they dovetail together. They come together. When Israel is redeemed, the church is also redeemed. In fact, the church's redemption has a lot to do with the redemption of Israel. The book of Ruth paints that picture for us. The redemption of Naomi came as Ruth was taken by Boaz. Boaz is a type of he's a kinsman redeemer. He's a type of Messiah. Ruth is a type of the church. Naomi is a type of Israel. So Israel's redemption will come when the church is redeemed, when the kinsman redeemer, who is Jesus, comes to reign in the earth. This is a very exciting reality, and it's something that we ought to be well grounded in, because we're very much involved in what's coming. And we will resurrect and come with him. Isn't that what we read? That's exactly what we read. We will resurrect and we will reign with him in the earth for 1,000 years as a priesthood, and redemption will ultimately come. The end of the redemption process comes at the end of the millennial kingdom, and that's Gog and Magog, and then we enter into a new creation. That's the narrative of the Bible. And the fact that so many people are basically unaware of this is troubling. Mm-hmm. It's troubling. Now, this may not be a heaven or hell issue, but certainly can be.
Well, we're held responsible for our knowledge, right?
Not so much knowledge, but what we do with what we
Right.
know. So ultimately, what we see is everyone's going to be judged based on what they've done. The parables of the talents.
Right.
Jesus, Paul even said it in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 10, for we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ to give an account for what we've done, whether good or evil. So the truth is, we are looking at conditions in the world today that clearly points to the end of this age, the beginning of a new age. Let us not be caught unawares. Let us not be like the preterists and those who will not even consider the age that we're in. They will no doubt be pulled into a system of liberal Christianity that will usher them into the false prophet construct. That will happen. I pray that many will turn away from it. I pray that many will walk away from that system. Again, like I say all the time, it's not God's will that anyone should perish, but that all will come to the saving knowledge of Messiah Jesus. That's God's will, and be redeemed. I'm speaking to believers in Messiah now. We need not find ourselves entrapped with errant doctrine and leading us to wrong biblical concepts. We ought to let the Bible define itself. We ought to believe what the Bible says and take it quite straightforwardly. The Bible wasn't meant to be allegorized. There are allegories in the Bible, no doubt. But the Bible itself, the story of the Bible, you cannot turn into an allegory, because the story is God's story of redemption. And Israel is right in the center of it, and that will never change.
Amen. That's our program. If these questions raise other questions in your thinking, you are welcome, please, to share those questions with us. Easiest way to do that is to email us at voice@buildupzion.org. voice@buildupzion.org. We're having a special guest here on Wednesday, March 6th, Yonatan Behar. He's a rabbinic scholar and public relations director for Yeshivat HaBracha, and he'll be here Wednesday, March 6th at 7:30 p.m. Everyone is welcome. And until next week, Shalom.
Shalom.